Put your hand on your stomach right now. Whatever is under your palm, some version of it has been there since before you could walk, before you could talk, before you had a single memory. You didn't choose it. Your body built it on purpose. I went looking for when belly fat actually became a problem, expecting a modern answer. Fast food, maybe. Desk jobs, sugar, convenience. What I found instead pushed the story back to before recorded history, and it complicated almost everything I thought I knew about the subject. Start at the very beginning, literally. In 1998, anthropologist Christopher Kuzawa, then at Emory University, published a study looking at something strange about our species. Human babies are born carrying roughly 15% body fat. Chimpanzee newborns, our closest living relatives, carry about 3%. No other primate comes close to matching us. Kuzawa's data placed human infants among the fattest newborns of any mammal on record, rivaled by only a single species of seal. That fat isn't there for warmth, the explanation Kuzawa's own research found weak support for. It's fuel, reserved specifically for the brain. In 2003, researchers Michael Crawford and Stephen Conane proposed that this is likely no accident at all. A human infant's brain consumes roughly 74% of its daily energy budget, compared to an adult brain's already large 23%. That kind of demand needed a dedicated fuel tank, something no other land mammal had evolved to carry. Crawford and Canane's argument is that fat babies may have been the starting condition that made a larger human brain possible in the first place, not the other way around. So the honest answer to whether ancient humans had belly fat is they were born with it, deliberately, as part of the basic blueprint. The question was never whether we'd store fat. It's why so much of it ended up around the middle, and why that stopped being useful somewhere along the way. For that, the story moves to 1962, when geneticist James Neal proposed what's still one of the most cited ideas in the field, the thrifty gene hypothesis. Neal's theory was that early humans who could store fat efficiently during good seasons had an edge when the lean seasons came. Feast, then famine, over and over, for most of human existence. The people whose bodies converted surplus food into stored fat fastest were the ones still standing when the surplus ran out. Abdominal fat in particular is metabolically active and quick to mobilize, which may have made it a convenient reserve for a body that expected scarcity to return on schedule. The problem, as Neal's hypothesis frames it, is that the schedule stopped. Scarcity became rare in much of the world, but the biological expectation of it didn't disappear. It's worth noting that the hypothesis has real critics. Some researchers have found no consistent link between the genes originally proposed as thrifty and survival advantage, and a few studies suggest ancient foraging groups may have eaten more consistently than the feast or famine model assumes. The debate hasn't settled, but the core pattern, a body built to stockpile energy it no longer reliably needs to survive, still holds up. There's also a piece of this that isn't shared equally. Walk through any gym or clinic, and you'll notice men tend to carry weight up front, around the middle, while women more often carry it lower, through the hips and thighs. That split has a hormonal driver, and it isn't fixed for life. In 2008, endocrinologist Joanne Lovejoy, at the Pennington Biomedical Research Center in Louisiana, tracked more than 150 women across 4 years as they moved through the menopausal transition. Using CT scans to measure fat depots directly, her team found that women who stayed premenopausal kept their fat distributed largely under the skin, through the hips and thighs. The pattern typically linked to lower cardiovascular risk. Women who crossed into menopause showed something different, a marked shift toward fat gathering deep around the abdomen, even when their total weight barely changed. Lovejoy's data pointed to estrogen as the likely switch behind that shift. While circulating, it appears to favor storage in the hips and thighs over the belly. Once levels drop, that protective bias fades, and abdominal storage becomes the default for men and women alike. Seen this way, the classic apple and pear shapes aren't really two different body types so much as two settings on the same underlying system, controlled largely by which hormones happen to be present. Which raises the obvious next question. If the problem is a body still bracing for famines that don't come, shouldn't the fix just be moving more, the way our ancestors did? In 2012, anthropologist Herman Poncer, then at Hunter College, led a study that complicated that assumption directly. His team measured daily energy expenditure in the Hadza, a hunter-gatherer population in northern Tanzania who spend hours each day walking, digging, and foraging. Using doubly labeled water, the gold standard method for tracking real energy burn, Poncer's team compared the Hadza's total daily calories burned against those of sedentary adults in the United States and Europe. The results didn't fit the expected story. After adjusting for body size, the Hadza burned essentially the same number of calories per day as Westerners sitting at desks, not more. The physical activity was dramatically higher, but total energy expenditure barely moved. Poncer explains that the body may compensate, spending less energy on other internal processes when activity goes up, keeping the daily total in a fairly narrow evolved range, regardless of lifestyle. If that holds, it means the difference between a hunter-gatherer body and a modern one may come down less to how much we move and more to how much and what we eat. It's a harder problem to picture than sit less, because it doesn't show up as clearly on the outside. Which brings up the second half of the question I started with, the part about thinness not being a reliable signal at all. In the early 2000s, molecular imaging researcher Jimmy Bell at Imperial College London began scanning nearly 800 people using MRI to map exactly where their body fat was stored. He wasn't just measuring how much fat people carried. He was mapping where it sat, inside or outside the muscle, wrapped around organs or sitting just under the skin. What Bell's scans kept turning up was a group of people with completely normal weight and normal BMI, who nonetheless carried significant fat packed around their internal organs, fat that doesn't show up in a mirror or on a bathroom scale. Bell coined a name for this group: TOFI, thin outside, fat inside. Some of the clearest examples in his research were, by his own account, professional fashion models. Slim on the surface, carrying visceral fat loads more typical of people classified as overweight. Visceral fat behaves differently from the fat just under the skin. It sits closer to the liver and other organs, and it's linked more directly to insulin resistance, inflammation, and cardiovascular risk. Bell's scans showed something that should reshape how anyone thinks about body size. Two people with identical BMI and near-identical body fat percentage could carry wildly different amounts of this internal fat, and one of them could be quietly carrying real metabolic risk while looking, by every outward measure, perfectly healthy. Put the pieces next to each other, and a strange shape starts to form. Human babies are born preloaded with fat because a growing brain needs a fuel reserve that no other primate carries. That storage instinct, refined over generations of feast and famine, seems to have made abdominal fat a particularly efficient place to keep it. Modern life has removed most famines, but hasn't removed the instinct, and moving more on its own doesn't appear to close that gap the way it's often assumed to. And the fat doing the most damage in that whole system is frequently the fat nobody, including the person carrying it, can actually see. None of this makes belly fat some kind of ancient design flaw. It made a version of us that could survive droughts our ancestors couldn't predict, and brains that needed more fuel than any other primates. The tools built for a world of uncertain harvests are still running in a body that mostly no longer needs them for that, quietly doing the only job they've ever known how to do. Put your hand back on your stomach. What's under it isn't a mistake. It's a very old, very reliable system, still working exactly the way it was built to, in a world that changed faster than it did.